welcome to the LTN Pulse, a podcast in the LTN Podcast Network. I'm going off of memory here, and it's super fun. This is a show where we interview people in LTN staff, adjacent ministries, and in the community to see what they are reading, watching, playing, and experiencing in nerd culture. I am Luke, the Director of Missions at Love Thy Nerd, and I am joined by a very special guest in person on this special episode, Jonah, my actually lead pastor, IRL, which is pretty sweet. But Jonah, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jonah. I'm friends with Luke. We go to church here in New Albany, Indiana. I've been here for, moved to Louisville in 2010, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. I went to seminary, came on staff at a church, came over here in 2013. Been here, lived 2 doors away, raising kids, doing pastor stuff. You know, real happy to be here, man.
Nice. I'm happy to have you. This is like super exciting. And as you saw, I'm fumbling through this a little bit because this is the first
You're doing great, buddy.
in-person episode, which is a milestone
Look at
for
us.
for our first season.
Look at us.
Look at us now. But thank you for being here.
Yeah, my
like
joy.
you said, you had a long way to go, 2 blocks away.
Yeah, it was about a 30-second walk. So, but it's snowing today.
It is snowing.
I don't
I'm looking
know
out the window,
where in America everybody is, but we got like real snow here in southern Indiana.
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's
not
exciting.
cold enough to stick, but
We'll see.
it's there. And I was very cold today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you being here. We met, I guess the first Sunday I showed up.
I don't know if
maybe.
this is true. Here's how I remember it.
Okay.
2 guys walked up to me and said, "Hey, we run a ministry called Love Thy Nerd." And I said, "Love Thy what?" And you said, "Love Thy Nerd. And we'd like to go to church here." And I was like, "Okay."
A bunch of weirdos.
Yeah. And I was like, "Well, you want to do what?" And I was like, "Okay." And then, an unexpected story from there, for me at least.
Yeah. We'll dive into that a little bit, but yeah, that was, for those of you who can't guess and figure that out, it was Matt. Matt was the other nerd.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think one of the first things we were like, hey, we want to start a game night, like here at the church.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things about this church specifically was how we pour into the community. And so it just seemed like a super good fit.
Yeah.
And we hit it off.
Yeah.
And not to bury the lead, but we found out you're pretty nerdy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of which, what have you been reading, watching, playing, experiencing in nerd culture?
Well, the stuff I'm reading, a lot of my job is reading, is not, it's nerd adjacent maybe, other than, like deep diving on Reddit forums about the best ways to win with the new Iron Man Titan of Innovation Magic the Gathering card, which we can talk about that later. But, this is not planned. It just works out. About a month ago, a friend of mine recommended a book called Understanding, and I'm going to have to read the title. It's kind of a technical title.
It's all good.
Understanding and Treating Chronic Shame, Healing Right Brain Relational Trauma.
Wow.
And so
that is a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. By Patricia Young. Patricia DeYoung. I'm going to give that one more time for the people at home.
Yeah.
Understanding and Treating Chronic Shame, Patricia DeYoung. And, I don't know. Who knows where the conversation will go, buddy. But I think for me, the name of this church is Sojourn Church in New Albany, Indiana. And we're in the shadow of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. We're a huge church town. And, I'm 42, and a lot of my kind of early discipleship was really emphasizing how important answers are, doctrinal clarity. And so I spent a lot of my Christianity, trying to get the right answers. And so you've got this problem. Here's what the Bible tells you to do about it. And that has been a profoundly frustrating experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was very helpful initially in learning the scriptures. But so this lady's book talks about, what is chronic shame and how does that show up in the way we relate to one another, and why aren't answers enough to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so it's one of these things where, I've been a pastor for like 15 years now, something like that. And you have these experiences, and then you find somebody that is like, oh, this is what that thing is called. And so that book has been really helpful, really encouraging.
That sounds, so just coming off of, we did a Enneagram course, like intro to the Enneagram. Yeah. And so we talked a lot, like with a lot of the
class we did at the church.
Yeah. Which is really cool. Not, like glorifying it or anything, but just like, hey, this is a resource. This is a tool in order for you to use to just kind of like figure out who you are, figure out how to relate to other people. Yeah. And, the ones I did make it to, I think I made it to most of them except one. Just with all the travels. But there was, we talked about that of like, why am I this way? Does it come down from shame? Yeah. Like what does my past say, like how I ended up here? Yeah. And I feel like that's a good follow-up.
I think at the church, one of the things, if you came to church here, then maybe you can blink twice if you agree. We try to say pretty often, we believe everything exists for the sake of relationships. Yeah. And so one way or the other, everything is either pushing us towards relationships or it's inhibiting our ability to relate. And we think the core of the good news of the gospel is reconciled relationships, our adoption into the family of God, a reconciliation with one another. And what this lady argues in her book is that healing shame, that feeling that who I am is not enough, my fear of getting too close, that's not healing. That is not a rational process. It's a relational one that happens in the context of relationships, not just like, Luke, you're so handsome. Luke, you're so smart. Luke, which you are, buddy. But
thanks.
You know what I mean? Like that, just hitting those answers isn't enough. And so as a church, we've been trying to think through how do we create spaces that can cultivate healthy relationships or create the opportunity for healthy relationships, not just, give people answers, but how do those show up in the way we relate to one another? So, that book's been setting my mind on fire. That's what I've been reading. What were the other ones? What I've been experiencing?
Are you experiencing anything? Yeah, that's one of them. Watching and playing.
Well, watching, we've got Thanksgiving break for my kids next week, and we're going out of town. I want to watch the new Dune Prophecy show. I'm not watching much right now, but
I haven't seen much on that.
I'm a Dune fan. Okay. It's a new show that came out about them witches, the Bene Gesserit. Okay. And the whole fear is the mind killer thing. That's something that little mantra is something that I found to be helpful over the years.
That's the first I'm hearing of it. So you're the first guest to
there we go.
That's what you're watching.
I don't know if that's okay. Are pastors allowed to watch that show?
I think so.
I don't know. I haven't watched it yet.
I feel like you're the authority.
But I want to. I don't know, man. I feel like a weirdo sometimes.
No, we're all
but
weird.
I don't watch much. I got 3 kids, so finding time to where when do we watch shows?
All right.
But I will tell you, playing. I am a avid Magic the Gathering player. This evening we've got Magic Night at our church.
Is it the regularly scheduled one?
Yeah, no. Tonight's game night. Tonight's Love Thy Nerd game night.
Tonight is game night.
There's just a group of Magic players that have
together.
hijacked a room,
which I'm okay with.
So.
It's awesome.
It's a hilarious room. The youngest person there will probably be like my 5-year-old, and the oldest person there, might be somebody in their 60s.
Yeah.
And so guys, girls, people that go to our church, people that don't go to our church. So I've been working on a new Iron Man brew.
Okay.
Marvel just came out with a special edition of Magic the Gathering cards, and so I got a hold of Iron Man.
Is that pretty hard to get a hold of, like all that set? Or how are they selling those? Is it in just packs?
Listen, this is you're dipping into real controversy here.
This is what I'm here for.
Well, so there's every so often Magic does these things called secret layer drops, which are like special editions of the cards.
Okay.
And you get it's no big deal. You get in the virtual queue, and then when it's your turn, you add the stuff to your cart, and then it takes a little while, and then you buy it, and no big deal. And so, it did not go well for Hasbro / Wizards of the Coast.
Typically, those internet drops go the same way every time.
So there's a lot of, if anybody cares out there, the Magic players who may be watching this are like, those guys suck. Like everybody who plays Magic knows about this. Everybody else can Google it. People were doing there was a workaround where you could skip the line, and stores were buying 20 sets. And so a lot of folks stayed in line for 3 hours and didn't get anything. But I walked away with Iron Man, Titan of Innovation. So thanks be to God.
A single card?
It's a set of 6 cards. So you buy the pack, and then you get Iron Man, and then so you get 1 unique card, 5 special cards, and a token, or something like that. 4 special cards in a token.
I was super jazzed about that like Iron Man and the Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
I just have not been in the state for the past 2 months.
Yeah.
So I have not been able to focus on anything like that.
Well, it's hard with Magic now, Magic is the only thing I play. And people will be like, hey, you want to come? There's a bunch of dudes that do BattleTech in our church.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I'm like barely managing my life with Magic, or people who like root for multiple sports teams I'm barely hanging on.
I'm kind of jealous
only one game.
of you just like focused on one game though.
I don't have room in my heart for anything else. It's too much.
That's the thing. I'm a very broad nerd. Like I nerd out about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I nerd out about board games.
Yeah.
I have some Magic decks.
Yeah.
We've played.
Yeah.
You've destroyed me.
Yeah.
There was that one time, it was real close though, and I deleted all your...
I believe you cast Austere Command and destroyed all of my artifacts and enchantments.
Yes. Which I think you were going to win the next turn. Yeah,
we were looking at like a turn 3 or turn 4 win, which is like a real beating if you've ever played Magic. And then it turned like 2 hours later.
That was late. That was after Good Friday.
Yeah.
It was a Good Friday service.
That's right.
You brought the heat.
That's right.
And then we're like, hey, have you ever slung some spells after a Good Friday service? And you're like...
And to illustrate why I can't play other games, I laid in bed that night for an hour or two thinking about how I could have played it differently. Did I overplay my hand?
Yeah.
Did I, have a...
you beat us all.
Handle that different. Yeah.
You beat us
still
all.
Won.
But you still, I think it was still a win in my
salty,
book.
Yeah.
Because you texted me the next morning.
Yeah.
And we're like, I can't believe you
you
deleted me like that.
Yeah.
And so that was good.
I like the idea of other games. But like recently I chose to start selling my comic books because I just disappear down this stuff. And so, that's a me thing, not a...
Well, like I said, it's a good thing to be focused in on one thing because I'm also a collector.
Yeah.
I like collecting all the things. So this isn't my board games here. This is
the
Love
community game library.
Yeah. Yep. But I've got 150 back home. I have a bunch of my old like Star Wars Lego sets.
Yeah.
But in storage.
Yeah.
Because my mom told me one day I would sell them, and I told her I would never do that. Yeah. And now I'm like, she might have been right. I like, if I'm playing a video game, I want to collect all the armor and put it on display. So anytime I get into something, it's a mess.
That's the same for me. And I just have too many other things in my life that I need to be into. So like I used to be real into RPGs, video games, and I could just disappear for days, man.
Yeah. And I think we talked about Destiny at one point. You played Destiny at one point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't cross paths until it was too late.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I had to learn that was for a former version of me. Because, I don't want to get too real on you here, Luke.
No, hey,
but it's like being an alcoholic. And it's like, how many drinks can you handle? And I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
So I have to quarantine. When do I play Magic? I play Magic on Magic night at the church. And then.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Even the Magic players. So we started like a Discord server for like Southern Indiana.
Yeah.
We wanted to focus on the community. We didn't want to make it
it's not a church thing. It's a Southern. Yeah.
And so a lot of people joined that. And the most active channel in that server is the Magic channel.
Yeah, it's wild.
Because every day somebody wants to play Magic.
Yeah. And it's so disorienting is not the right word. But for me, I started playing Magic when I was 11. And I can still remember at the lunchroom table seeing these two kids playing. And somebody had a Mahamoti Jinn and a Siobhan Dragon. I remember seeing them being like, what is this? But it was like you play in the shadows. You know what I mean? Like it was not... Or like comic books. My dad would take us to Spellbinders up in Cleveland, Ohio every Saturday, and we would go buy comic books. But it was like you would never announce that you read comic books or that like, and so it's been wild seeing how, what an embraced and positive part of the culture it's become.
Yeah.
Now, at least at our church, I don't know.
Sure. I mean, I see it at going to conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the biggest sections of like the con is magic. And I remember from my first one, people were like, if you don't know anything about magic, just stay in your lane, avoid it at all costs. Like, unless you're interested. If you're interested in learning, they will gobble you up and like accept you in and share everything with you. But if you go in and try to hang and make friends, they're gonna be like, who are you? Get out of here.
Well, and I know enough that there's pockets where magic can be a little bit weird, but at least at our church, like there's a guy in our church named Josh, shout out Josh, who like when when people started playing magic here, my oldest was probably 8 or 9, and I was trying to teach him how, and like Josh just showed up and was like, hey, here's a deck I built your son. My oldest, his name is Booker. And like Josh would sit down with him and teach him how to play. And so how welcoming folks have been and how open they've been. And even just like strangers showing up to game night with magic cards, or it's like when I was 11 or 12 or 13, it was like you walked into a room of magic players tiptoeing. Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. I don't participate enough in the broader magic culture to know, is this an LTN thing or is this a magic thing?
I can still see some of that. I've played against, I'm fairly new. I do have 4 like pre-con decks, and I think that's my limit.
Well, they're whooping people.
I can, I got that Eldrazi deck.
Oh my God.
From, I don't know.
Modern
like
Horizons 3.
Yeah, 3 drops ago.
Oh my gosh.
That's stupid. It's really dumb.
Yeah.
But I've got a few that I can whip out. But there's some people I can play with that are like, they're all about winning and they're going to destroy you and go infinite. And then it's just like, that's not fun.
It's not fun.
For me.
Yeah.
But then there's other people like Josh that are like, hey, oh, you didn't know the legendary rule?
Yeah. Super cool. Patient.
Now that you know, like, for the future, you can't have 2 of the same legendaries out. But since that's how you thought it played, let's go ahead and like move forward with that. It's like, dude, you don't have to do that. Yeah. But that's going the extra mile he wants to make sure people enjoy magic. And I think that's why it's thriving like in our community nights.
And really, there's that one guy that's created a culture around that where it's, it feels like the magic stuff to me feels like a subset of Love Thy Nerd in our church. And, it's just been really remarkable. Yeah. Cause it's become more than just like playing Magic the Gathering. Yeah. I think, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. So. I think that's actually a good segue into the next question I had for you is how do we and should we merge like nerd culture ministry, like in the church? We're talking about church game nights. Yeah. Like how is that good for the church?
So I wish, like, I'm not a strategic thinker. I'm not like the guy who's like, here's our 2025 vision plan or something like that. And so again, like philosophically as our church, we believe that everything exists for relationships. Yeah. And so we're always looking for how can we create spaces where people can connect. And in terms of how Christians grow, we think it's our contention that relationships are the primary way Christians are going to grow. So the best discipleship strategy for you is to be friends with other Christians. Yeah. Intentional friends. We're following Christ together. We're praying together. We're serving together. And so part of what that looks like practically is we want people to do the things that God called them to do. So we want this to be the church that God wants it to be, rather than like, I moved here from Florida and it's like, I have this vision for what a church, and it's like, I have no idea. Like, I'm a cultural outsider here. I don't know what this place needs, but our belief is that God will bring people here that have something that the church needs. Yeah. And so we ask people all the time, like, what do you want? What do you need? Mm-hmm. What do you want? What do you want to do? And that's how, you guys came and we're like, we want to run a community game night. And we were like, for what? And you're like, so people can just play games together. And it's like, well, does this fit within our ministry mindset in terms of creating a space where relationships might happen? Mm-hmm. It's like, yes. Was everybody going to come? It's like, no, but some people will. And boy, like a lot of people have come, and not from our church. I mean, from our church, but it's been like a surprising outreach event. Like we don't do like door-to-door evangelism or stuff like that. And one of the things that I think has been so beautiful about it that really it's impacted the whole church is like we have all these sermons and all of this material about relationships and like everything we do is about relationships.
Yeah.
And it's like, but what do we really mean by that? And it's like, well, come to game night. And this is what we mean by it. People who are doing something they love, everybody's welcome. And like I don't know, man, like it's hard to believe sometimes when I walk into our church building and I'm like, who are these people? And I don't mean like, oh, look at you dressed funny that way. It's like, where did you come from?
Yeah.
And
how did you even hear about
this? And I think the last game night we had somebody come down from Indianapolis, I think.
We've had several people travel a long way.
And like, we're not a big church. Like we're tucked in an old historic neighborhood from like, it's all shotgun houses and we're in an old 100-year-old elementary school building. Like, we're not like this giant megaplex where people are, you know what I mean? Like, we're not known, we're not popular, we're not big.
We blend in.
Yeah. We just envision a town of 30,000 people and what their 1900 elementary school would look like. And like, you've got it.
We meet in the old gym.
Yeah, that's right. Game night happens in the lobby that we've kind of retrofitted out of an old classroom.
And that's because we outgrew our like multi-purpose room. Yeah. Is that got super crowded and loud. And
you know, what's been really challenging in a good way, like what I think the church has learned from, it's still, even hearing it's like nerd culture, I'm like, you did not call people nerds when I was a kid. Right. You know, so even that is like, it's funny hearing it. But really the like, people gather around what they love. And when you love something, you make room at the table for other people who love it. You know, maybe that would be a succinct way of putting it. And so seeing that, like, when a new person comes to play Magic, we're not like, what is your position on baptism? Or like all this weird church stuff. Like, how many people go to the church you go to? Or, you know, we do these like measuring things. And at least and this could be our weird portion of the world where there's so many churches and there's this weird church competition thing. I imagine there's other places like that. But it's like somebody sits down and you're like, hey, what's your name? What's your deck do? Yeah. Are we like, is this going to be a fair match? Let's play. Tell me about, and then figure it out. So seeing how much room there is for other people at game night has been, there's been so many times I've left game night and be like, this is like the most churchy thing I've ever seen. Yeah. Churchy in the sense of like, this feels the most like church. Yeah. People can come, people feel welcomed, people don't feel threatened.
And they keep coming.
And I mean, the stories that have come out of it are wild. So I think, the church has a lot to learn about what draws people together because again, it's like people are drawn how would I say this? I think people are drawn together by shared loves and an experience of being loved. And like, that's the context where relationship can happen. And that's a different, are we inviting people over to a dinner party, or are we like, are we like travel agents trying to sell people on a trip to someplace we've never even been? And so those kind of images are different. Are we inviting someone into our lives with us? Or are we saying like, hey, Luke, I have something you need. Take it. And then some people take it and like, well, now what? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
I think that's what, to take it back to the beginning of when we wanted to start this specifically was, hey, we don't want to church it. Yeah. Like, we don't want to stop in the middle. Like, all right, everyone put down your magic cards. Like, we're going to share a quick Devo. Yeah. I think there's a space for that. But like this, like you were saying, is, hey, how do we bring the community in that's never set foot in a church otherwise? And we thought, like, man, this is going to be a huge hurdle. Yeah. It's like, hey, we have a game night. Great. Where is it? It's in our church. Like, I'm good. Yeah. I'll go somewhere else and play games. But we were pleasantly surprised with the sheer amount of people. Like, it took some time, but we're, I think, going on like year 3 of doing this. Yeah. And we've had up to like 70, 80 people attend on some good nights, but we average around like 50, 60. Yeah. And it gets packed out. Yeah. I mean, it's enough to be like, our building's AC can't keep up in the summer. Yeah. How many people are in room? You know what I mean? Like, and it's shocking. And that's not like, again, like, it's not like we're a huge church where we just put something in the bulletin and 100 people show up or something like that. And it's, there are a lot of folks from the church there, but it's not all church folks. And I can think of a bunch of people in the Magic group that are now on the Discord. And it's like, these aren't church members. Yeah.
these people have real church hurt.
Yeah.
These people actually don't trust Christians, but they're gathering with Christians and experiencing relationship with Christians. Right. And I wonder what might happen.
Yeah.
I wonder what might happen through this. And I'm thinking more in terms of the healing intentions of Jesus and not just like the conversion intentions of Jesus. Yeah. Because there's a lot of folks that, at least in our area, most people have some story with a church. Right. Even if they didn't grow up going to church or not. And so I just think that what you guys have done, the culture that you've helped create, has created such opportunities for healing. And this sounds weird to say, but it smells so much like Jesus, the way because there's people that have found a home through game night that, they don't fit. Right. Like they're not obvious fits for where would you be socially otherwise, whether that's in their home or at school or in their careers or, so I think it's really beautiful. And what's interesting is it all started, part of me wishes like this maybe would sound more interesting if it was like, we have this plan and here's what, and it was just like, we really want to do this and we want to create a space to do this. And it wasn't, at least for me, particularly hard. Like we didn't have to come up with a vision statement or you guys were like, we're going to do a raffle and we're going to set out games. And I think the big effort was, can we put a poster up in the church about it? Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is a balance. Like we want our church members to be there because we want it to be that presence of the love of Jesus, like in that space. But yeah, like we post on Facebook. We have like Facebook events. We've got, like word of mouth travels within the community. And so like people are like, oh, this is actually a great game, like bringing their friends. And I mean, we've got all sorts of people. And you mentioned church hurt, like a lot of people, like that we've had conversations where like, man, I didn't know if I'd like this game night. Yeah. Like totally coming to a church and doing this, but I mean, like this is one of the best well-run ones. People be like, I never thought I'd set foot in a church again. It's kind of weird that I'm back here and it's, it's not what I thought it was going to be or, something. And I think, the vibe, I really like how you talk about like, there's no bait and switch at the end. You're like, hey, everybody gather. We just want to remind you, you're going to hell and we can fix it if you want. Or, that I think a lot of people have been through those kind of like icky Christian things. As it feels like game night is saying like, hey, we want to do something with you, not we have something for you. Like you need this, come. It's like, come along with us. And that it feels more like Jesus saying like, hey, follow me or come with me or let's be together. And so it's just lined up super well with kind of our relational orientation as a church. And it's probably, honestly, I wouldn't even call it our ministry, but it's like the most fruitful ministry, I feel like, at our church. I think, I say it a lot of, we want to love people first and meet people where they're at. Yeah. And it's not up to me to like change people's hearts and to save souls. Yeah. Like that's ultimately in God's plan. That's right. And he's the one doing the work. And so I can do my best to lead people, to shepherd people that direction. And it's not, I grew up with the term, I've said this before, of like soul winning. Yeah. And in a competitive, like if you play Magic, it's very competitive. Right. If you play board games, you could get very competitive. And so it's like, if you're not winning, you're losing. Yeah. And so it's like, it's easy to say, if you don't see that fruit, you feel like a loser. Yeah. And you feel like you're not doing your job. But you said it like this, just like creating that welcoming space has brought in people that was their first touch base of our church. And then I'm thinking of one guy specifically, saw, I think on one of the other posters for another event, went to a men's prayer breakfast, and then went through our membership class and became a member of the church. And now he's like, he brings pizza every night, every game night, and is just like super involved. If we're thinking about the same guy, a guy moved to town and he had a pastor that he really loved at a previous church, and he was talking to him, and he was like, I don't know how to find a new church. And his pastor told him, he's like, find a place that knows how to love well. Yeah. And he was like, so I wanted to I wanted to see the community of the church. I ran into this guy like 2 months after he started attending at a magic store. I walked in to buy some magic cards and he was there, and I was like, "You too?" and so he said, I got online and I saw game night, and I was like, I'm curious what this will be like, because my pastor told me, watch the community of the church, see how they love one another. Don't listen to their sermons, watch the way they love. And he was like, so I went to 1 or 2 game nights, and I was like, boy, these might be my people. And then I got on the church website and I went to a men's prayer meeting. And then I went to a men's coffee, and I did that 2 or 3 times. And then I listened to a sermon. And he's like, so I was involved for 4 or 5 months before I ever listened to a sermon or came to a service, because I wanted to see how you related to one another. And it was game night. And now he's like one of the drivers of game night, showing up, bringing treats, bringing snacks. He's really elevated the culinary options.
He's on our like Sunday morning security detail.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So that's just like one.
So seeing that, but that's like some of the cultural shift of like, is Christianity real in the sense of the way we live and love with one another, not just the things that we say? And I think that there's been a lot of folks that have heard the right things to say, or whatever. I've been in church for 20 years and I still feel like God's disappointed in me, or he's still angry with me, or I should be doing more. Or one of the first ministries I was a part of, I remember them saying like, hey, nobody's lining up to tell these people about Jesus. It's you or they go to hell. And that pressure of like, oh my gosh, we've got to go and go, like all that kind of stuff. So, that one story with that guy is just a great example of,
like loving people first. Actions speak louder than words. Like that's powerful, coming from his previous pastor of like, hey, look how the church loves first.
And Jesus says, 2 things, like they'll know, you'll know a tree by its fruit. And then he tells the disciples, the world will know you belong to me by the way you love each other. And so that, I thought that was really good advice from that pastor. And obviously we're not saying like, oh, it doesn't matter what you say, or truth is one of our core values as a church. We're pro-truth, but we think the truth rightly embraced and experienced will show up in the way we relate. And I just feel like Love Thy Nerd has become such a wonderful landing spot for people to experience what we're trying to cultivate. And it's not the only, like we had a lady come up to a member meeting and was like, well, I'm good at swing dancing. Can I lead swing dancing lessons? And like, we are in a don't rock the boat, Indiana, whatever. And we're like, if you want to. And maybe like a month ago, I officiated a wedding, the 3rd couple that's gotten married out of that. And, like people are coming to church and there's 30 or 40 people coming. You know what I mean? It's like hilarious.
That's crazy.
And it's people in the neighborhood wanting to dance. And it's like, Christians who do something that they're good at it and they love it and they're interested. Let's empower them to do that and to gather people with similar interests and see what might happen. It's been, in some ways, like our church looks nothing like, the strategic, like, here's how we're going to build it out. And, but I'm quite tickled by it.
I think that's super powerful though. 'Cause like nerd ministry could look different in another church.
Sure.
Where it's like, okay, it might not be swing dancing and it might not be board games, but there could be a heavy video game presence of like, hey, we're going to run, Super Smash Brothers tournaments like once a month. And like that could be thriving. One of the weird random examples that pops into my head is like, you could have a whole church full of like lumberjacks. Like, is there a lumberjack ministry? Like there should be. Well, I think another thing that we say all the time is like our best ministry is our people living like Christians. And, it's funny. I had the guy who told me this the first time I had coffee with him before this. He said that like Christianity is less about doing something new as it is doing what you're already doing in a new way. And so the point he was making is like, do we need to start a lumberjack ministry, or do we need the lumberjacks to live as Christians? And if they do, what will they do? And having that kind of like, do I think I know what this church needs? Or am I willing to say like, Lord, what do these people need? And would you show us? And when someone comes up and it's, like ladies bingo night. Do I care about bingo? Do I have a real burning passion for bingo? Do I think bingo is like the answer? Like, no, but probably not.
But if we're in terms of discipleship, like if we think that Christians being friends with one another is going to be a primary factor in their growth, then let's empower Christians to gather. Whatever. There's just so many silly examples of of what that actually looks like in our church. We're doing affordable Christmas this year, which our members buy Christmas gifts. We've talked with folks in the neighborhood. They've got kind of wish lists. Members buy the Christmas gifts, and then we sell them at a 90% discount to folks in the neighborhood. Why do we do that? Because somebody was like, I'm really interested in helping provide a great Christmas for people in our neighborhood. And we're like, sure, go do that. So that's kind of seeing it emerge from within the community. Trusting the Lord will raise up within the community to meet the needs of the community, rather than this elite group. The only people who can be creative in the church are the pastors. That's
what I really appreciated when we came to you guys and we're like, hey, we want to start a game night, is that there's not a cookie cutter. And this is a whole other podcast episode of small groups.
Stay tuned.
It could be part 2. But small groups, I came from a church. We were heavily involved in our small group. We loved it. But then our leaders moved on. And then it was trying to find another one that satisfied us the way that one did and met our needs was near impossible.
Yeah.
And then we came here and there was no small groups, but it was you put it on the community and the members of the church of and this showed when we were hey, can we start a game night? You basically handed us the keys and you're this building, this church is just as much yours as it is ours. And so it's go do.
Yeah.
And so empowering the community, the congregation to start something like that, whether it's swing dancing, whether it's a men's coffee prayer meetup every Friday, whether it's a game night, that really shows through.
There's a watercolor group that meets to paint watercolors in our church. There's people that get together to share stories. There's an addiction recovery group that meets. There's there's a women's gift exchange that meets once. I mean, it's so what we are interested in, what I am passionate about, and what I think the scriptures attest to is that we were made for relationships. God designed us with a relational orientation. In our lives, we're wounded in relationships. And I think through our adoption into the family of God, through the blood of Jesus, we will be healed through relationships. Yeah. So it's I'm about relationships. And I also don't know you people. There's just too many folks. Yeah. If you've got the average church sizes in America is 60 people, and you cannot be close with 60 people. Right. And so I don't want to presume that this, a lesson that I learned. I'm a big Disney fan too, Walt Disney. Yeah. And I read a book about the kind of Disney way of management. And they talked about how a couple of times a year they'll have open meetings with any employee can come and you can give a pitch. The executive team is in, the auditorium and they just give a pitch of here's an idea. And the book listed all of these movies that got made because, the sweeper from the Magic Kingdom Frontierland had this idea. And the management team at the time said, we just didn't believe that the only creativity in the Walt Disney Corporation was in the executive room. And so being oh man, what ideas might there be in our church? Yeah. And we just haven't asked. And so what do you want to do? What are you interested in? What are you good at? What do you think we need? And does it further our mission for relationships? It's just borne incredible fruit because it empowers people. It helps people to find their place in the body of Christ. It helps them live a life of consequence and purpose and meaning. And it also relieves a whole lot of pressure from the pastoral team and the staff to feel we got to, we're not a Walmart, you know what I mean? Right. Trying to come up with a service that meets every need.
And I think that's what sets us apart is you ask. It's we ask the community. I remember you telling the story of when you first started over here across the river from Louisville. Yeah. You went to the community and you're hey, how was the community 10 years ago? What is it like now? What's the difference? What do you want to see improve?
What's the best part of living here? What's the saddest part about living here? Yeah. What do you miss about living here? And it was so revealing about what this place actually loved and what they longed for, what made them feel safe, what made them feel hopeful and excited. And I mean, that's really shaped what we do. Yeah. Because this, I don't imagine many people understand Louisville geography, but the church that planted this church started in the Highlands of Louisville, which is like a very kind of, at least at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s, was kind of a punk rock, progressive, artsy.
Yeah.
And that is not the Midtown Silver Grove neighborhood of New Albany, Indiana.
Right.
And so if we came here just assuming that, you know, and honest, I don't know, like if in 2004, if we had tried to start a game night at Sojourn Midtown, I don't know how that would have gone. You know, I don't know that that would have been the cultural need.
Yeah.
If we had started a punk rock mosh pit dance, that probably would have. But I think the point is if what we're after is not my strategy or not my vision of what a church is, but creating space where meaningful connections can happen. I think it opens up our strategic possibilities.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's us. You just open the door for the Spirit to lead.
That's right.
You trust God of guiding us to, hey, this is what you need.
Yeah.
Sojourn New Albany needs a game night. Yeah. And it needs swing dancing. This other church, they need, you know, a video game ministry.
Yeah. And I think pastorally, it forces you to ask the question, am I willing to pastor the church God wants here if it's different than the church that I want here? Or at least what I imagined. Because, you know, I thought I was going to be this revival preacher. Yeah. And now then I moved to like one of the most churched areas of the country. And it's like, oh no, we're a church for people with church hurt. Yeah. And am I willing to do that? Or do I want to hold on to like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want a comic book ministry. I want a Bible study ministry. Right. Whatever. Sure. You know what I mean? So.
That's tough.
But it's been so freeing and empowering. You know what I mean? Like, let the Lord build his church and try to be a faithful presence in the midst of it. Yeah. And it's not that, it's just funny. How do you do that? Well, you just ask people, what do you want to do? Yeah. I don't know, man. Like at a member meeting, be like, hey, if you're good at something or you feel inclined to do something, you should do it. Come let us know. And then you got to make sure you've got avenues where people can actually do that. You know what I mean? But, how much simpler it's become has been really freeing versus this feeling of like, I got to figure everything out for everybody. And that could just be a personality thing for me. Like, I don't want to mess with that, or I ain't trying to be stressed like that, Luke. Yeah. So
not everything works. Yeah. Sure. But if you're not given the opportunity, like you're not going to find like what the community, what the church needs in that space. And
if we're saved by grace and if God really loves us and it doesn't work, it's like, well, that didn't work.
Move on. It's like you live and you learn.
I think about it all the time where it's like, well, what happens if the church closes? It's like, I don't know. The Lord will probably take his Christians to other churches. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and we live in a place where it's like, it's okay. Let's be free and try stuff. And obviously, like, I think orthodoxy sets boundaries, you know, like, what can we try? What's safe? Where are the safe places to play? But then let's go play. You know what I mean? Like, so our church recites the Nicene Creed every week. And it's like, this is our sandbox. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going outside of these walls. So anything that contradicts that or communicates outside of that, we're not going to do that. But, you know, I'm trying to think of what would be an example of something that we would say, oh no, we can't do that. Other than like something totally egregious.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's tough to pinpoint.
Yeah. But anyway, like, I think you guys, both in terms of your courage and the community that's been built around it, it's been a real great lesson for the rest of the church too, to see that. Even the folks that don't play games, or it's funny seeing the dads who's like, their 12-year-old really wants to come play. Cause like our student ministry is, I mean, they come to game night and it's fun seeing the dads, you know, the first week they're like, why am I here? And then the next month they're like, I mean, I guess I'll play. And then the third month they're like, it's not so bad. And then,
well, we might go a little bit over our time, but not too much. Cause you mentioned
I'm chatty.
Of like, there's one more story that I wasn't sure if we were going to get to, but you kind of just like mentioned that like families coming in. Yeah. There was a mom that brought her 2 kids to a game night that was just looking for a safe space for them that they could be accepted and meet people their age. And we've kind of seen that come full circle. Yeah. And you mentioned like,
well, even before that, so this family, the daughter, so both the kids are, you know, they're just trying to find a safe place to be them. Yeah. And, a lot of moms from the church knew the daughter because she volunteers at the library, just looking for something to do. And our local library does, they do a lunch program where, during portions of the year, you can just come and someone will read a book and you get a lunch. And, and so she'd heard about our church through moms just showing up in the community. And, but then it's like, I don't know about these Christians. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so then they invited, to game night. And it's like, well, I can drop my kids off to come play games. And I can still remember the way the older son was, where it's like, he was not he had headphones on, wasn't talking, wasn't engaging, and, but showed up and he was welcomed and people made friends with him. That over a period of time, that turns into him showing up on Sunday, still with the headphones on, dark sunglasses on. And then that turns into him. The headphones went from up here to around his neck. And then he starts talking a little bit. And then he starts sitting closer to the front. And then he starts being really chatty. Then he starts asking questions. Then he starts coming to S2, our student ministry. And then I hear like, hey, we're baptizing him. And then hearing his story. Then he comes to the membership class. And then it's like, you look at who he is now, even just the way he interacts, how comfortable he is in his own skin and talking. And he's 17, something like that.
And he's smart. Like, he's serving in the morning,
serves on the Connect team.
And we go over a passage of scripture together, just like read through and share thoughts. And man, he's like more chatty than I am. And he knows his stuff. It's just really cool.
And it was, a mom, and the mom is like, I don't know what to make of all of this stuff, but my son is different. And these people love my son and my daughter. And so she'll drop them off and leave. Sometimes she stays, sometimes she goes. But it all started because these kids, a couple of kids, wanted a safe place where they could be them. Not going to be teased, not going to be made fun of, not going to be, pushed onto the outside. And it's been remarkable. I mean, I wish I could say there was this moment where someone like had the perfectly articulated apologetic or something, but it was a consistent presence in the lives of Christians. And
it comes back to what you were saying of like the relationships come first.
That's right.
Hey, you're gonna show up, and that was like thankfully like left up to our teens, our student group of like them just being trained well in the church in that program to be able to love.
And by trained, I think we just mean loved well. You know what I mean? Like the relational stuff. It's like that's all we do, and so it's not like we had this training program. It was like when humans are loved, they love. When Christians know that they're loved and safe, they behave like Christians. At least that's my my contention. And so I just didn't want it to sound like we have this relationship training program. You know what I mean? It's not that way. But it's totally, a bunch of teenagers welcoming some teenagers and being cool with them being a little awkward and a little standoffish and a little.
We're all a little awkward.
And
weird.
Right? But there was room. There was room at the table. And a lot of, so, I mean, I feel like with the 40%, 60% of our baptisms in the last 3 years have come through Love Thy Nerd. I remember a dude getting baptized where he started hanging out, like he heard a Love Thy Nerd podcast or something, or watched a stream and came here with his parents. And then his dad got him a copy of a book called The Gospel According to Star Wars. And this guy's getting baptized. I remember exactly where I was. We have folks read their baptism stories on Sundays, or someone reads it for them. And the guy talked about Love Thy Nerd and a book called The Gospel According to Star Wars. And I was like, God's going to save anybody. Because when you guys came and were like, we want to love nerds, I was like, whatever.
That sounds good.
Whatever you want to do. You want to use our building? Sure. Cool. Whatever. And then being like, oh my gosh, people are getting saved. And it feels like you guys created a space where people could be themselves. And, so I think it's beautiful. Such a fan of what you guys are doing.
Well, that being said, like LTN is merely just a path. It's not the answer. It's not like, hey, you need an LTN ministry in your church. It's like, hey, we want you to learn from us. We want you to learn from Sojourn of like how you can do this and how it could look different and how you can meet that need in your church. And so if someone watching or listening to this wants to partner or just like chat with us or go to our website on, how to start a game night or can Christians play Magic the Gathering? I know there's a good author behind that one.
Oh, shucks.
And there should be more coming.
Yeah, we'll see.
Come up with
I committed to it, so I think I will.
We'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
But yeah, like LTN, what we do, we don't want our brand on everything. We want to just help kind of start that fire of, nerd revival.
Yeah.
There's your revival story.
Stepping outside of like the program, or the branding, it was like there was a group of people that loved something and have an area they're interested in. And it was like those people we're interested in.
Yeah.
We want to love those people. And so we're going to create opportunities to care about those people. And that, and it worked here. But would that be any, that's kind of like the story of Christianity. Like, how did FCA start? It's like, hey, athletes, we want to go love athletes. And that drive of there's a group of people that we want to care about.
I often compare what we're doing to, I don't even know how many years ago. I just make up like 30 years ago, sports ministry.
Yeah.
If you were to say like, hey, I want to start this, like, basketball ministry.
Yeah.
People are like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so we're on the verge of, this becoming a mainstream thing with esports becoming super popular and Magic like coming back.
Yeah.
Not that it was ever gone, but there is a resurgence and like with a lot of other things too in nerd culture. So I think that's a good place to stop.
Cool.
Jonah, thanks so much for...
Thank you, Luke. It's great talking with you. Love what you guys are doing.
I always love hanging out with you.
Yeah, you're great.
And
we didn't even get to talk about the Over the Garden Wall party. I wanted to name drop that. It's just another example of the great things you guys are watching. Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about that on the next episode where we talk about small groups.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah. We gotta. I do want to have people back on the show, so we'll definitely do this again. Cool. But thank you for being here. If you're watching or listening to this, thank you for being here as well. I'm not going to do my whole outro because this is a very special moment. So you're watching this either on our live stream on Giving Tuesday or later on Spotify or YouTube. So you know how to find us, do those things. But thank you for being a part of this. I will see you next time. Jonah, thanks again. I'm super great.
My man.
All right. Take care.